T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, folks. Hello, everybody. How you doing? Welcome. This is the Launch Sequence Podcast, episode 69. Nice. And with me today is good friend, OG, the man who helped me start the podcast in the first place. What is it, like a year and 4 or 5 months ago now? Draaz3n himself. Thank you so much for joining me for today's show, man. How are you doing?
Doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. I've been doing a lot this week. We've been getting ready to head out for a little bit, come back in a couple of weeks after doing a little bit of exploring, and I've been trying to get ahead on work. So actually, yeah, that brings up a good point. This episode is airing on September 19th. However, we are currently filming on the 7th. So it's a little bit of time traveling. Maybe things have changed by the time this airs. We're talking about MMOs and Star Citizen. Maybe Star Citizen transitioned to an RPG by that time, and unfortunately, we're out of date. It only takes a week to do that, right? Change the whole game genre around. Makes sense. Anyways, today we're having a conversation about Star Citizen, how the concept of it, because obviously it's still pretty far from being a finished MMO of any sort, how the idea of it compares to other MMOs on the market. And I brought my friend here, Draaz3n, along because he knows MMOs. You've played quite a few in your time. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I started with Wrath of the Lich King with World of Warcraft back in 08, 09, whenever I was very young, eventually moving to other games like Elder Scrolls Online back in early 2015, 2016, as well as more recent games like Lost Ark and most recently Fractured Online.
That's a lot. So I've never played an MMO, which is kind of why I wanted to have this talk. I always kind of did want to do this podcast as a way to learn more about different games and different genres. And I think this is probably the kind of episode that I really was looking forward to because I don't know much about MMOs. Star Citizen is going to be my first. I know that plenty of other people. Star Citizen has a wide reach. It drags people in from a lot of different places. And I know there are probably other people who are kind of dipping their toes into the genre for the first time. So how about let's start with the basics, kind of what generally makes an MMO. I know they're all different, but if you could give like a small feature set that you would expect from an MMO, what would that be?
Honestly, it's fairly simple. MMO is just a massive multiplayer online. So anything that has, a ton of people online at one time playing a game, that can fit a lot of games that are out there right now. I think that is one of the critical features of an MMO is in the name itself. It's a massive multiplayer online game. If you fit that, odds are you're fitting into the MMO genre as a whole. And then, of course, MMORPG, typically they lean into each other quite a bit as a role playing game where you have a character that you customize to some level of customization, whether that's, you're picking character one or character two, or you're putting dimples on your character, all the way down to the skin tone and the hairstyle. And that role playing as a certain character, you are the character you are playing in that game amongst a sea of other players who are also doing the same thing all online.
So one thing that comes up a lot with MMOs, and you kind of just mentioned there, you're against all these people in a sea, right? But from what I understand, a lot of times MMOs aren't actually about competing with other people. You kind of can progress and quote unquote win for yourself without ever having to encounter another player. Is that true?
Yes, I think for the most part, you set your own milestones at your own pace. You can get into, let's say, for instance, World of Warcraft today. You can go back and complete classic content that came out in the early 2000s. And for you completing all that content and checking off all those boxes and getting some cool gear, you can do that. Other players have done it years before you, but that doesn't matter. If it's a win for you, it's a win, period. You can really make your own kind of path and your own achievements based on what you want to do in a game. You can totally compete if you'd like to, but with a game like World of Warcraft, you are really doing whatever the hell you want to do and progressing truly at your own pace.
Hmm. Okay, so let's set up like a list of MMOs to talk about today. You mentioned the ones that you have played before. There was WoW. I think you mentioned one called Lost Ark.
Mhm.
What were the other ones?
Fractured Online and Elder Scrolls.
Okay.
Those are kind of the four that I've played a lot and know a lot about. Other games I've tried but didn't like were games like New World, Final Fantasy 14. I've played old school RuneScape, but not a ton. That is a very old game. And EverQuest, I saw somebody mention that. I had played that as well. Those are games that I've tried out, but I didn't get deep enough into that I feel like I could talk about them and relate them back to Star Citizen
Yeah, I get
on
you.
a level to talk on this podcast about.
I get you. That's
Mhm.
I played RuneScape for like 2 weeks back when I was 10, so I know that. I think that
Mhm.
counts as an MMO. Um, so we'll compare all of these kind of to Star Citizen as we get through the different topics of these games. But speaking of Star Citizen, how's that game been treating you lately? I know you've been pretty busy with work and stuff, but have you been able to jump into the verse at all?
Yes, I have. Haven't accomplished much besides getting my ship out of the city and just checking out some of the new events that they have going on. I got to participate a little bit in Jump Town, which was neat to see, but essentially nothing super new to really hop into right now. For me, I'm waiting on a lot of the cargo refractor because I wanted to be a cargo guy, so not a lot for me to do in that scape of things. But as far as the more ship FPS stuff that I also really like, still not a ton for me to do on that side. So, I haven't gotten too invested into the game right now.
What do you think of what are your thoughts on the cargo refactor coming up? Because that one's kind of shaky, right? We haven't really heard much.
Um,
You think it's
I mean,
actually going to spur you back into the gameplay, or
I hope it does. I want it to. I want it to be everything it sounds like it's going to be. And if it does, if it's everything we think it'll be, where I can now start hauling and I can start making really good money, and the time I invest into hauling most types of cargo will pay off. Yeah, it'll definitely get me back to the game. Now, do I think I'm going to be hauling cargo multiple hours every day of the week? No. But it'll at least give me something to rest myself on when I don't want to do the high action stuff.
see, I'm skeptical it's going to do anything with the actual cargo gameplay. I think it's just going to be they physicalize the boxes and then do more from there afterwards. I kind of don't expect them to be doing too much to actually balance the cargo out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's how I feel because they haven't told us anything about it, and the only thing it says on the descriptions is the physicalized cargo. So I don't know, but
Yeah.
I hope it's more. I, I
I hope
hope it's
I
what
hope
you
so
think it
too.
is, because that would be much better. Cargo gameplay is not in a good place.
It's not. No, I mean, most gameplay loops aren't in a great place right now,
Yeah,
so it's tough.
yeah. It is. It's really putting the sand into the sandbox, or I don't know. It's putting the
Hmm.
sandbox into the sandbox. You have to make a lot of your gameplay in Star Citizen right now. A lot of your fun, and that I think is a good first thing to look at. The difference between a sandbox and a supposed theme park MMO, and everybody kind of knows that Star Citizen is a strong sandbox MMO. But what would let's say what would Star Citizen look like if it was a theme park MMO?
God, we would have planets that you would go to that are for a specific character level. Well, first, I guess we'll roll this back. You would have character levels, and you would get experience through killing or crafting or doing missions or quests. From the moment you log into Lorville, you have a quest right in front of you, and the whole part you're guided through the city to your ship. From your ship to a planet, and that planet will be one you would level at, complete quest set, explore at, and all of this. And then once you're done they rein the leash back and say, okay, now here's all the planets in this world. You're only level 20, so you probably want to go to the level 21. And the whole process is guided for you. That's what Star Citizen would look like if it was a theme park MMO style game.
So the theme park really guides you into specific levels. Then that's not separate from the idea of a theme park MMO.
No, I mean, with a theme park MMO, it is, there is a set linear kind of progression that you take. Yes, there will always be some new, interesting experiences that they'll add, but at some point you're going to reach the end of their theme park experience.
Hmm.
Whether that be through a level cap or an expansion cap, there's at some point you will hit the end of that theme park and you can either go back and ride all of those rides again, or you are just waiting for more things to come out.
Hmm.
So,
I've heard a lot of comparisons between like to the point where I feel like this game is practically a spiritual successor to Star Wars Galaxies, just kind of in the way that they're built. And I've heard people talk about how that is kind of a sandbox. And it was doing things like pushing multi-crew ships and space travel and going to planets and all this stuff that's a lot like Star Citizen, just obviously scaled down. Did you ever get to play that one?
um, not much, no, but I'm interested to hear what your experience was. Did you get to play it?
No, I haven't played it. I've been tempted to. I would love to see if maybe there is a mod for it that updates the graphics. I'm such a
Yeah,
sucker
right?
for graphics. It's so bad. Like I was super excited for the Coder remake, just because it's such a great game, and to see it with updated graphics would be awesome. But I never played it. No, and no,
I
I've
played
just
SOTOR a lot.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
That's actually, so where does that sit in terms of sandbox, theme park, kind of what are they pushing you
I mean,
towards?
you have levels in SOTOR. Um, you have quests. It's not as guided for sure, but you have your dungeon, your typical dungeon kind of activities that you can do to complete levels. You can do PvP to level up some. You have different stories that you can partake in. Usually, when you start a quest, or like a quest line. They have a main quest line, a main story quest, MSQ, what you call them.
Hmm.
You definitely have that you can complete that will take you through all of the standard starting planets and zones. You do have zones that you have to be in within a certain level. Um, but after that, they have their expansion DLCs, which are all stories on their own that you can complete as well. So it's a tiny bit less guided than WoW, but it's still along the very similar aspects and mindset of what a more, you know, kind of MMO experience like that is. Not sandbox, definitely more theme park side.
Yeah, it sounds like they're still guiding you quite a bit. So
Mhm.
that's sort of, is there like space exploration or any exploration at all in the game? Are there
No.
places to go? And no, everything is just, you just go places, do missions, do quests. There's not like professions and stuff like that, or
There is in SOTOR and in World of Warcraft, there are different crafting professions, gathering professions, which definitely tend to lead to their own exploration,
Mhm.
but you're still exploring within a certain path, right? So you're exploring in that zone that you're doing a story quest on, right?
Yeah.
You're going back to collect materials from that old zone that you quested in because you didn't level up your professions in time while you were doing your story quest. So you're always exploring, but still within a certain, you're not going outside the lines any.
So it's pretty constrained though.
Mhm. Yeah, pretty constrained.
That that honestly sounds almost like a single player game with multiplayer thrown in. Is
Yeah.
that kind of how story based MMOs start to feel? Is that something you've ever felt like you were just playing a single player game and the MMO part was just extra?
Yeah, I think when you're doing story quests to level up, you're definitely experiencing more of a single player kind of aspect. Um, what games like WoW and SOTOR do is they, at some point, you hit a quest where you are required to have other people to complete that next part of the quest. Whether it's, hey, it's a quest where you have to kill this boss in this dungeon or this raid. You are doing your little single player thing, doing your crafting, your leveling, and then all of a sudden, hey, you now have a point where you need to complete some objective that's going to require you to group up with people to complete it. So it's kind of weird because it's like a bump in the road, right? Like you're just driving along, doing all your stuff, and all of a sudden you got to take this detour, drive on a completely different style of road to complete this objective, just to get back on that main road of, solo questing and leveling up.
Mhm.
So,
You mentioned earlier the idea of a story, you'd have like a storyline in Star Wars The Old Republic. I guess that's kind of the example we're sticking to right now. And
mhm.
from that storyline, you'd be able to do other branching quests and areas. That idea of one main story that everybody else, or sorry, one main story that would last, I don't know, how long would these kinds of stories last? How long would they go for?
I mean, with World of Warcraft, I mean, for every expansion, you can easily sink in 20 to maybe 30. I don't want to say 30 because I feel like that's a lot of gameplay, but I with some expansions that WoW has had, if you're progressing through that main story, it's easily a good 20-30 hour story and leveling experience combined.
Okay. So
Um,
you are starting your mission, playing for like 2 hours, logging off, getting back on next weekend. Are you continuing from where you left off, or do people like how does that work in a traditional
yeah.
MMO? Are people spawning in the same spot and then going back out to meet? Like what's that process?
Yeah, it's really wherever you log off is where you start. You're still in the same
Okay.
spot with the same health, with the same status effects. If you ate food, you're still there. You're still on out of, let's say you're on a quest that requires you to kill 20 enemies and you killed 12. When you log back in, you're still at 12 of 20. So you're just exactly where you were in the beginning.
hmm Okay.
So,
The See, that's something that I've always loved about idea Star Citizen, logging off in your ship and then coming back in, running a mission with your friends. All of you kind of
yep.
log back off, agree on a time, come back in, run a mission. But um, oh, I lost my train of thought. Love that. The idea of being able to run a mission that takes weeks and weeks to complete is something I've heard of, but I'm not sure if it's considered to be normal. But it's good to hear. I'm glad that's kind of just a thing that you see. You see that in all the MMOs you play.
Well, it really depends. I think WoW does it in a different way where they have a quest line that you can only complete, one quest per day, where it's like, okay, I'm grinding up like reputation. Reputation is a great example because we'll have that in Star Citizen. We may have it where if you're grinding up your reputation with Ninetales, you can only do one quest to get rep every day, maybe every week, where essentially you're now calling Ninetales place your home. Similar to other places. I think during the Cataclysm expansion and WoW, there was the Defenders of Hyjal. For those that had played, they'll know. I think this is probably not sounding like I'm talking in Cyrillic for anybody else that doesn't know. You essentially parked your character there, and when you would log on for the day, before you do anything else, you do these daily missions to get your rep because you're daily cap or weekly capped at
Yeah.
doing these quests. So you may end up doing that with Ninetales. You're going to be hanging out in Ninetales and Pyro, getting your rep for them, and then you're going to go off doing whatever you want to do, because that's your main way of getting your bulk of reputation for that day or week. Um, it's kind of similar like that. So there are instances where it can take weeks or months to really get to that end game point with a certain faction or something. So
What's another sandbox MMO that you have in mind, or that you've played that you have good experience with?
I'll say Eve, but I don't have great experience. I don't have great experience playing the game, but I also don't have a lot of experience playing the game. But I think Eve is definitely one of those, is the standard for a sandbox MMO, where it relies a lot on emergent gameplay that players kind of create as they play the game. Usually, it's like various events from corporations that they conflicts they create. Building factories or locking down a system, large fleet attacks. Eve is definitely that game where you're kind of thrown into the deep end and you're making your own experience.
Hmm.
That makes a truly not massive but massively open world for players to be. So if you have that lust for exploration and pioneering, those sandbox MMOs are a great place to be. And that game for everyone, I feel, is Eve Online. So
Okay, so let's say then Eve Online, you
mhm.
log in for the day. Would the game be giving you objectives or the dailies like you were saying for the other MMOs? Would you have things that you need to do, or is it you get into the game and you go and you do what you need to do based on your own ideas?
From my experience, again, this was years ago. No, you don't have quests like you do with WoW. You log on and good luck.
Okay.
Go find your gameplay. Go if you're trying to build a ship, go to the system and mine the stuff you need to build that ship. Hey, there's this war going on between these two corporations. If you want to go partake in that, sure. You want to do some trading, okay, good luck. It's definitely not guided at all.
Hmm. And that's fairly rare. It sounds like because
Yeah, oh, very rare.
I feel like most of the MMOs, now that I'm kind of starting to remember some of them and from what we've talked about, are fairly guided or what we could call theme park MMOs.
Yeah, actually a great example of a sandbox MMO that I've been playing recently is Fractured Online. It's still in beta right now. It's a decent game. It's only $25, so not terribly pricey. But it's super interesting. You start off in this tutorial island. They just teach you the basic mechanics of the game, how to craft some stuff, how to kill some stuff. And then essentially they say, hey, use this portal to go into the main world, select where you want to spawn. You're off on your own. The only quest you have to complete after you go into the open world of the MMORPG
Hmm.
is you have a little quest on the side. And that quest says, you have new player protection. New player protection expires in either 40 hours or once you reach a certain amount of knowledge points. You
Hmm.
get knowledge points from killing enemies that are of higher difficulty or crafting or all this different stuff. So it says, hey, you are immune from PvP. But once that expires, once you've reached that many knowledge points, it's not levels, it's knowledge points that you can select different traits or skills
Sure.
for your
Yeah.
character. But once that expires, it is not an opt-in, opt-out PvP unless you're one of the alignments. So we were kind of talking earlier. You have your lawful good alignment. You can't attack people, but they can't attack you, and your character will never be able to change their alignment. You are always lawful good. You can only do the PvE side of the game.
Hmm.
You cannot partake in any PvP. However,
But you're playing
the other
alongside
two,
PvP players.
you're playing alongside other PvP players and
Okay.
other PvEVP players. The thing is, when you're tagging mobs and other big bosses, you may not get that loot. So, yes, while you may be able to have this full PvE experience, you're sacrificing a lot of the game in doing so. Now, this is great because you can just create another character and have their alignment be, neutral or, chaotic evil. But for that character, they will never be able to change their alignment. But it does get your feet wet so you can experience what early, mid, late game progression feels like in this game. You
Hmm.
kind of get an idea of where everything is. So then you can go back with a different character, do that experience over again, but have a different alignment. So you can get more loot, you can progress faster. So,
So it sounds like an example of a sandbox RPG or sandbox MMO, but with quite a few of those more gamified elements. The idea that you can get points in order to reach a certain, not level, but a certain stage of development, and
yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you
No, it 100% is.
do you think? What do you think of a new player system like that in Star Citizen? Because that kind of goes against the philosophy, right? The idea of just artificial limits on gameplay.
Yeah, so I've gotten into this discussion with a lot of people, specifically ones that have played Elite, not Elite Dangerous, Eve, where they have high sec areas where essentially people tend to just never go out of these areas, and they just farm money and become whales, and never move out into the PvP aspect of the game. And
Mhm.
they're like, I don't want that in Star Citizen, because then people will just get wealthy and they'll never want to go out into PvP areas, so pirates can't have their gameplay. Shut up. It's I get that, understanding, but you also, knowing that Star Citizen is just going to throw people into the deep end, you have to provide them with some experience where they are not going to be pirated day one. No good pirate is going to want to pirate a new player day one when they have nothing on them. That is not pirating. That's griefing, and I think most pirates understand that. So I think it would be good if they had a planet or a system or just an area where, hey, you can do stuff and make mistakes and you're okay. You won't be able to do that when you're out into the open world, but for now, learn what you need to.
When you
you
say
know
do stuff and make mistakes, you mean like they can die and it won't go towards their sort of like a life limit thing?
Exactly. Yes.
Ooh.
It would essentially just be kind of what the game was like before it's released. The game we had back in 3.12, essentially, but
I
updated. But
I
that way people can kind of learn. I mean,
yeah, I mean I can sympathize with letting people learn through that.
yeah.
I don't know.
But it's tough, right? Because you want them to learn the core mechanics of the game, but you also don't want to drive them away. I mean, clearly they've already bought into the game. CIG's made all the money they're going to make on them. They could make more if they got them really interested, but it is what it is. I think long-term CIG is going to want to make money off people by selling ships and skins. They're not going to get that if they don't have a good new player experience to keep people invested in the game.
Of
So,
course. It would
you know,
be worrying though to know that there are people who could just make an account that
mhm.
has some form of protection. I guess if it was in a certain area, that would be different from a certain time period, like the other game does it. So,
Well, like Fractured does it. You're on Tutorial Island.
oh, I thought
Everything
it was
you
a time
craft,
limit.
no, no. So everything on the Tutorial Island, when you move into the real world to play the actual game, none of that carries over. The only thing that carries over is the basic weapon that you crafted and the shirt off your back. Those are the only things. So you have a little bit of, armor, a weapon, and that's it. None of the stuff that you can farm in this tutorial area carries over into the game.
Hmm.
So once you leave that tutorial area, you're on your own, but you can still practice all that and gather and craft and do all this stuff to just get an idea of what the game is like.
Hmm.
So they do have that, so you can't just go into this world loaded up with all this stuff.
I mean, I could see like a beginning planet kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
It would be, yeah, that'd be interesting, at least for them to experiment with. But we never know what they might do with that down the line. But we've been talking kind of around the subject of leveling up versus, well, I guess the idea of a level-based versus a skill-based MMO. Star Citizen is a skill-based MMO, obviously. It's one of, I think, the main features that sells it. It's one of the main reasons I like it. But it doesn't sound like that is also very common, because it just sounds like the game you're talking about, I think Fractured you called it, is the only other one that you've played that's like that, or were there other MMOs like that?
Fractured is, yeah, probably the only one that I can think of that is very similar, in those specific regards. Yes.
Okay. Because the idea of a skill, I mean, that's part of, I think, what drew me to Star Citizen, and part of what I don't really like about other MMOs is having to reach a certain level doing something specific in order to be able to continue to do more of it. And I think some MMOs have gotten kind of caught into the trap of continuing with that model. Have you played Elite Dangerous?
No, I have not played Elite
Okay.
Dangerous.
Okay. We
But
can.
But as far as skill-based MMOs, I mean, the skill is either how good you are on your, your profession or how good you are at PvP because those are your two ways you're going to make money is by looting other players or creating your own loot or moving loot.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of MMOs they just reward you for progressing. So a lot of your reward comes from that, from just progressing as a character or from completing certain milestones like dungeons or raids or things of that regard.
The gosh, what was I gonna say? I'm sorry, I keep losing my train of thought. Um, the reputation in Star Citizen, does that feel kind of like a leveling mechanic to you? Like a hidden leveling mechanic? Like you don't have to reach levels, but if you continue to add to this kind of this
Mhm.
counter, then you will be able to unlock new things.
No, and in fact, I think that's where Star Citizen actually carries over some stuff that makes it not as much of a sandbox MMO. I'm going to get castrated for that, but I think there are things when it comes to reputation. Reputation is a very theme parky kind of MMO idea, right? Where you're spending time doing quests or doing activities for a certain, organization or group, and doing so, you're working to an end goal. You know, in Star Citizen, there's some function to that. There is armor you can unlock, or at least unlock the ability to buy. There is certain kickbacks you're going to get for doing that. Some reward for doing this certain theme park ride
Yeah,
essentially. So
yeah.
I think Reputation definitely has that kind of theme parky idea to it for sure.
And honestly, that's not really a bad thing. I like that it's a mechanic that is normal, right? Progression, some form of artificial, we'll call it progression, in that it's not your natural skill, but something the game is tracking. But it's also kind of off to the side. It's not really what you're looking at. You're looking at your ships, your items, the money you're making, the places you're going, your habs and all that kind of stuff. But then there's always sort of reputation is in the background. But I don't know. I really
Yeah,
like the idea of using reputation as progression. I hope they continue to double down on it because it's a cool one. Have you seen
absolutely.
have you seen a progression like that in another MMO you've played?
No, and I think that's what makes Star Citizen really unique is their take on what sandbox is and what a theme park MMO is. They're very Star Citizen is very unique in that regard, and I think that's what makes it such an attractive game for people to want to take up, especially from the MMO space, is because it's not something we've quite seen before. We've seen iterations of it through Eve or through World of Warcraft or ESO or Lost Ark, Fractured Online. We've seen these different styles, but Star Citizen it has its own unique flair to it.
Yeah, I'm still I still am looking for, I guess, another MMO that kind of captures the same feel of Star Citizen but isn't the same. Are there any that you know of that are kind of like this sandbox? And obviously, I mean, what Star Citizen's going to be, not what it is now, because it's
Yeah.
not a game, but a game that is sandbox based, skill based, um, kind of encouraging of group play, because a lot of these MMOs, like we were talking about before, can feel a little single player-y. Uh, or any other ones hopping out to you?
I mean, Eve fits those. Eve would be the closest fit,
That would
honestly.
explain the crossover. We do see a
Yeah.
lot of people who are coming between those two games.
Yeah, Eve would be probably the closest kind of comparison just with those things that you had stated. Eve for sure.
Okay, that kind of, I've heard people refer to Star Citizen as being kind of like, oh, you're getting into something like Eve, but you're actually in the ship. But if it actually
Yep.
worked like that, would be very cool. Hopefully
Yeah.
someday. All right,
Right.
let's talk about death.
Mhm.
Super fun topic. Um, Death in Star Citizen has its own whole thing. Death of a Spaceman. They've got a name for it. It's like permadeath, but not exactly permadeath. But in terms of how MMOs work, I've heard a lot of different things. I'd like to start by asking, what is corpse running?
Yeah, corpse running is when you die, either to a player or a mob, you essentially respawn either at a graveyard in WoW or in Elder Scrolls Online. It's at a waypoint. Um, in in Fractured, it's a nearby town. Um, in other games, it could be your home base or wherever you set as a spawn point. Essentially, corpse running is going from whatever place you spawn at after you die and going directly, taking the shortest route possible, the least time possible to get to your corpse, either just back into that general area because that's where you need to kill things or take revenge on somebody, or some cases of other games where the loot on your body is dropped, you need to go back to pick up that loot so you don't lose any of it. Hopefully it hasn't been looted off you.
Pretty straightforward. Pretty much what the what the name sounds like. When
Yeah.
in most of the games that you've played, how far are you usually going? Like in Star Citizen, because the scale is ridiculous, right? I'm flying 20 million kilometers to get back to the place I had spawned in at. What's kind of like your let's take one of the popular ones right now, Lost Ark or New World,
Yeah.
or WoW or something. What are you kind of what are you running?
It all depends on what you're doing. If you're in an instanced content like dungeons or raids, you're teleported to the front of the instance essentially. So you have to run all the way back. That could take anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute, 2 minutes
Oh, that's not
maybe.
bad at all.
If you're out in the open world for WoW, I mean, it could take 2-3 minutes, which isn't awful. Sometimes you can fly when you're dead. Don't ask me why. I can't answer that, but sometimes you can fly, so it's super quick. But to other games like Lost Ark, they're mainly it's going to spawn you back at a town or a city, and maybe if you're trying to get back to that area, it takes a couple minutes. With Fractured Online, your body drops with all your loot and you spawn back at the nearest town. Well, you can either spawn back at the closest town or the last town that you were in to save your spawn. You may be a good 5-10 minute walk or horse run to your corpse. So it definitely can vary. It usually doesn't take longer than 5 to 10 minutes to get back to your corpse, though,
Okay,
for most games.
cool. So not the 40 minutes that I'm used to.
Not the 4 minutes that we're used to, no, for Star
Yeah.
Citizen.
So Star Citizen is a bit of an anomaly then when it comes to the time investment that it takes.
hmm
Say,
Oh, and more ways than one.
how so?
Oh, well, not just with, corpse running, but everything in general, just traveling to certain points. Everything is just longer.
I want to ask about, I guess, the interaction system makes looting more difficult, but let's talk about like literally picking things up, putting them in your backpack, bringing them back to where you are. Is the process kind of similar there? Because Star Citizen does a lot, like they really try hard when it comes to the whole inventory thing.
Yeah. Um, Sorry, you got a little interrupted there with
Yeah,
the singing in
yeah.
the back.
I've got the call to prayer going. It's become a
Oh, yeah.
podcast staple.
Oh, absolutely. Could you repeat that for me?
Yeah. Oh, is it that bad? It's just overpowering me.
Yeah, I was like catching a little bit of what you said and then the singing and then what you said.
I was just asking about how inventory is handled and
Oh,
the idea
inventory.
of
Okay.
looting and everything. Yeah, how that differs a little bit.
Yeah, inventory and looting. So with WoW, you have bag space. With Elder Scrolls, you have bag space and weight attached to those items. In Fractured, you have bag space and a lot of weight tied to each item. So I think looting kind of has a mix of a certain bag limit, and in some games they have weight limits that could, over encumber your character.
Sorry, I'm really trying hard not to let this get into the so, and we've heard about, actually, Star Citizen doesn't have it now, but being able to get over encumbered is a thing that's going to be a reality. Um how many games have like physical handling of objects or physicalize the objects really? I guess
Physicalize.
let me how many games that
Yeah.
you've played? I keep asking how many games, like you have universal knowledge of every game, but of the games that you play,
Mhm.
how interactive are they? I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, some more than others. I mean, the level of interactiveness kind of depends on what the item is. If it's a crafting item, it's usually just a reagent. So you're picking it up off a corpse that makes sense to pick it up off of. Like you're not getting a vial of poison off of a horse, you know?
Just got a description on it that tells you.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, maybe you're getting, a wolf pelt from a wolf, and that pelt can go as a reagent into crafting something.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, the physicalizedness of it really depends. It's game to game. Sometimes it's something you can interact with a lot more. Other times it's just used as a type of currency or a type of reagent to do something else with.
So, and do you lose all that stuff when you die? You said that the corpse running thing is all about back to get the inventory. So like that's not weird. That's not out of the ordinary.
No, it's not out of the ordinary. Some games do it. Fractured Online does it, where you drop any, crafting materials you had on you. So no, that's definitely not new, and it's definitely not a different take or anything super hardcore. So.
How about insuring stuff? I know that in Elite Dangerous, they say don't fly without rebuy. I believe always have enough money to get your ship again. And I think Eve had something like that as well. But the idea of insuring or paying some sort of into a money sink to cover your stuff, is that ever, have you seen that?
I mean, I haven't seen it with other MMOs, and not any MMOs I can think of, but there is a game that I doesn't really fit into the MMO genre as a whole, but definitely
Hmm.
has insurance, and that is Escape from Tarkov, which
Okay, yeah.
of course, you're going in, shooting people up, whatever, getting loot, killing scavs and raiders. But yeah, you can insure your stuff. And that's a game where if you die, you lose all your stuff on you. You can't even go back and corpse run it. But if nobody picks up your loot and you insure it, then there is a potential for you to get it back as long as nobody looted it or took it, So.
So that's actually a good game to bring up because I hear that's probably the game I hear compared to Star Citizen most outside of the space genre. People call it Space Tarkov. Um,
Mhm.
is is that a game that you would why isn't that one compared to sorry, why is that not considered an MMO? Because it's round based?
Yeah, it's round based, so you're going
Okay.
into an instanced version of certain maps. There's only a certain amount of players on that, and the lobby closes in an hour. Usually it's between, 30 minutes to an hour. You're only in there with a certain amount of people, and when you go in, whatever you do, you do. It is let's say you leave a can of beans on the stairs. That can of beans will be on the stairs only until that server closes out and flips to the next map.
Right. Yeah.
So, it again, yeah, it's very instanced round by round kind of basis. So,
Hmm. That actually brings us to a good topic, one that's pretty timely. Persistent entity streaming and kind of just like global persistence of objects is something I've been hearing about and like listening to them talk about for years, but really only in the last couple of weeks have I started to actually ask people how it compares to other MMOs. So this idea of items persisting across servers, across days, like just the idea of having universal access to these items, is that something that you've seen or heard of before?
it's we've always seen it in games where things persist only for a certain amount of time and then there is server cleanup. Um, you know, It's not something where we have had where I can set an item down and come back a week later and it's still there. That's not something we see a lot. Usually, if we have something like that, it's within some sort of instance. Like
Hmm.
we have a house and we can put items in there and they will always be in that place we put it in, but it's not in the open world. It's in an instance version of the game or of a portion of the game.
Yeah, yeah. So like, another player is not going to come by and be able to pick that up. They have to make sure they're on that same instance.
Yep.
So, okay, interesting. Because I still, I keep trying to understand, try to like pinpoint just how big a deal it is. I can't. Uh, Things with Star Citizen always seem like a big deal because Star Citizen has been very um, not good for a long time. So like when things are coming into the game that are big for Star Citizen, I try to put them into context regarding other games, because other games obviously have more going for them and have a more complete feature base. But I've never been able to really understand it when it comes to persistent entity streaming. It sounds like it puts it above a lot of MMOs, though.
It is, and it really will. If they can do everything they say they are going to do with it, it's going to be really interesting. But I also think it is a neat, shiny feature that won't have a lot of meaning if it's not something we come across all the time, right? So,
Yeah,
I mean, I think over time, you
it will.
see,
Yeah,
yeah, it'll carry more weight because more people, the traffic going through, it makes sense, right? Um, but I think for now it's just going to be a shiny new thing, and then we'll see how well it plays out. It's cool, but we'll see.
right. It doesn't change the game, the way the game looks, but it changes the way it plays. It's just something that you'll probably notice over time more. It's it seems like a niche feature, but it's again one of those things that I think will continue to help Star Citizen kind of differentiate itself as long as it works. Let's see. Let's talk about PvP. So, how many games have you played that basically say everybody is involved in PvP, whether you like it or not? If you're in the game, PvP is possible.
Absolutely. There are games like, World of Warcraft, Elder Scrolls, things like that where you have instanced PvP where you take a part of it within a certain version of the game. It's not like an open world PvP kind of scenario. And then there's games like Fractured where, in most cases, you're going to have the chance of, that PvP happening at any point in time as long as you're not in some safe town or city. Um, and even those towns or cities could also be marked as a lawless city, and you could even be attacked within the city too, which even adds a more interesting characteristic. But I think Star Citizen's version of the always PvP kind of model is definitely one that we have seen a little bit of, but they will definitely be that first kind of MMO of its style and type to really explore it more in depth. You know, Eve Eve does it in a way, but they still have high sec areas, you know, they still have areas that you can play and hide in
Mm-hmm.
where you can still play a lot of the game and not have to worry about PvP. But Star Citizen will truly be that, okay, yeah, you'll have safe cities or maybe planets, but you can still be attacked. They might have law coming after them, but you can still be attacked at any time, which is going to make things super interesting.
How about your standard, more mainstream MMOs from which you've played?
Yeah, so with the standard MMOs, it's always, hey, you're doing a battleground or an arena. It's an instanced PvP kind of
Okay,
thing.
they give you like a pretty big warning and make sure. How do you
Mhm.
feel about it? What do you think of always being able to be attacked?
I mean, I have my own feelings about it, of course. I think there's a lot of, you get to have a say in a way of if you're going to be, PvP'd against or not. Clearly, if you're in a area that is frequented by pirates, it's like going into the bad side of town, stay away from the bad side of town if you don't want that to happen to you. So, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting once we truly have that. And piracy is a legitimate gameplay loop for people, but we also have the reasons to be pirated or to be attacked. I'm kind of waiting. I think that's the big thing for Star Citizen. If I start out in the game, I won't be new, but we'll all start off fresh at some point, right? If I go in and I'm in Lorville, I'm getting all my stuff together that I know I need, I get my Cutlass Black and I start flying off. If when that day comes that the game fully comes out, right? It's the running joke. And I
Comes
am
out, yeah.
immediately PvP'd against, and I can't progress anywhere for hours to get out of, Hurston, then I will know that CIG is messed up. Because if me, somebody who has experience playing the game, is like literally everybody who's starting out new and I'm getting PvP'd constantly and I can't find any way to, circumvent this,
Mhm.
then I'll know it's a failure, because there is why if I'm coming up against this, then everybody else is, right? Yeah, maybe we band together and take care of the problem, I get it, but I think the how PvP is going to be handled on a larger scale for everybody once we all start fresh and new with a lot of the game systems implemented, it's going to carry a lot of weight with, you know, how I will feel about PvP in the game as a whole.
Yeah.
That's a really long-winded way of stating that.
I kind of feel the same, and I worry that by the time that we're starting to figure that out, it's too late. I think it's really going to come down to how good the AI is, because in my opinion, I think they should be safe zones that in a traditional MMO would be no PvP, and that's not even just PvP. That's also PvE, right? It should be just high security, like you said in Eve, but the AI has to be good enough that people feel like it's, an armistice zone. Like, if you're going to shoot someone, there is a 90% chance you're going to get wrecked. And so just put your guns away. And they're going to have to balance that. That's going to be tough. I don't know if they can do that.
I know. And that's what I, really hope is we want piracy. We want PvP, right? We want to have that as, gameplay that we're going to experience and come across, sometimes not when we always want it, but we want it to be in a way where it's not going to harm new players or people just starting out. That way they can actually be legitimate targets for that gameplay loop, because nobody wants to get the beat down at the start, So
have you ever heard of like a prison sort of mechanic? Like an in-game consequence for doing bad things, not even just PvP stuff, but just bad things in general?
So yes, there are certain games where they have had, sometimes, like for ESO, if you're doing PvP in areas where you're not supposed to be or you're doing illegal activities, you can go to jail. You can, you have to pay a certain fine. You lose any items on you that were marked as stolen. So yeah, there is like a jail kind of process, with some reputation being tied to it as well, but not as heavy as Star Citizen will be. Right. But yes, in other games, you're just killed on the spot. You have to corpse run back to get your loot. And yeah, you're not going to be targeted as an enemy player, but you're punished because now you're set back 5-10 minutes, for your actions. So I definitely not a prison and reputation as deep as we're seeing in Star Citizen for sure.
It's always struck me as a little bit weird. I like the idea, but it seems like it's very idealistic.
It is, but I think, risk reward of all gameplay, right? And you're risking prison and having to play the prison gameplay loop if you do the piracy. So
yeah, the hard part is making sure that is enough of a deterrent while also still making sure it's fun for people who end up there, right? Because like it's part of the game. You don't want to rob a store, complete a mission, and then get put in jail because you happen to not be good enough to get away, and then jail is actually not fun. Because like, what's the point of playing that gameplay? You don't have to be a pirate to be getting put in jail. You could be doing some mercenary work where you just like steal some plans for something for somebody else. I just think that it's hard to make it scary and fun. Like, I don't want to be there, but I also would like to be there.
Yeah, and I think that's why they'll do with kind of the crime stat, right? Like, I think if you're accidentally crashing your ship into stuff, okay, whatever, you're clearly in a city trying to get out of your landing bay. You might just have a fine that you have to pay off for damage, but like, I mean, how much trouble can you get into innocently in this game in Star Citizen?
Oh, right now?
Like, can you innocently kill a whole city of people? Whoopsies! I accidentally pressed the red button.
You can innocently murder a security guard very easy. They just teleport right in front of your gun. Nothing personal, buddy. Takes a bullet to the back of the head.
Trigger discipline, man. I mean, and I think that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Even if you do make a mistake and you have a good bit of prison time, you just have to understand, okay, well, hey, this happened and I need to prevent this from happening in the future. I don't think everybody's going to want, crash a bingle into Hurston. Like, whoops.
I guess
didn't mean to.
I guess they don't have to make it fun per se, but I do think that they should make reasons for people to not feel so bad about being there. A mission giver in there, maybe a contract that you have to take and then get into there. I just feel like prison shouldn't necessarily be, hey, we're just going to beat you down for choosing that gameplay.
Well, I think Lucid Strike just had a great comment. Prison doesn't have to be it just has to be less satisfying than the open world, right? You just have to have some of your freedoms being tread on, essentially.
Hmm.
You are now stuck in this area.
You
You
can't
need to
vote.
complete these tasks to get out. You can't vote. You don't have access to your money. You can't talk to your friends. You need to do all this and get out and learn your lesson. It doesn't have to be painful because a lot of people are probably going to have to experience that, right? It should be painful for people who have a CS5. Yes, you're now getting, you can't do all this stuff for 12 hours, because
Yeah.
you've decided to crash a bingle into Hurston. But
Yeah.
for the guy with a CS1, okay, you're in here for 30 minutes. It's a little mistake you made, whatever. We're going to throw you right back to where you were, and you're fine. Just make sure not to do that again.
Hmm.
They're both the 12-hour guy and the 30-minute guy are going to have the same experience and the same opportunities to lower their prison sentence. But clearly, that 12-hour guy is going to have to put a lot more work into getting out than that 30-minute guy. So
Speaking of the idea of crime stats, kind of like a GTA sort of police system. Like it's the same idea, right? You get to a certain level, it gives you one section. You get to a certain level, it gives you another one. Is that something you've seen in other MMOs?
yes, yeah, they call it like heat, I think, in some games
Hmm.
where, the more crimes you commit, the higher heat that you have on you, the more people, you'll go from just being arrested to being killed on sight by guards or by bounty hunters. Yes, that is definitely something that we've seen before in other MMOs.
Okay. How
And
about how
ESO
about
would definitely be the big one.
how
Yeah.
about okay, ESO would be a big one. Um
Mhm.
an ESO, actually I don't want to we'll talk about that in a second. Actually, no, let's talk about that. So ESO has some server mumbo jumbo going on, right? That kind of uh, does some different things with the netcode, kind of similar to what Star Citizen is looking to do. Or do you know anything about that?
Yeah. Yeah, they have shards. They have shards for every part of the continent. Like every zone is a shard. So like when I teleport to, you know, one certain continent. I can't think of the names right now. I think it's like Glenumbra, which is
Hmm.
a whole continent that has like, a city on it and then like little towns and places you can visit. Every place is kind of like a shard. And of course, if you're in North America, you're on a shard, and there will be, 20, 30, 50, 100 people in this town or in that area, that's on that shard for North America. Of course, there are similar shards in other areas of the world as well. But you are on, that one server with all these people, which is really, really cool. So yeah, they have a similar is kind of system as to what Star Citizen's doing.
So
So, but
that's
not the level of what Star Citizen will be.
yeah. So, but that's not instanced in ESO. One
Mhm.
of those shards. Anybody like if they go to that place, they will find their friends there.
Yes, yeah, as long as you're in, yeah, as long as you're in like North America, like within a
Yeah.
certain kind of
Okay.
geographic area, you'll find your friends there.
Okay.
So, and
Cool.
even if you're not on that same shard, you can invite friends from other shards onto yours as well, which is really neat.
Um, is that do they have any sort of level of persistence from the items?
I mean, outside of instances like your inventory or player housing, no.
Okay. Have you ever played Black Desert or Arcade?
No, I specifically never wanted to play Black Desert and Arc Age. I have friends that played it, but I never quite got into it. I forgot the company who did Arc Age. I forgot the name of them. I'm trying to think
Why did
of.
you not want to play Black Desert?
Black Desert Online never really interested me. I didn't like the style of the game. And then Arc Age, there was another reason. I think it was the company that makes Arc Age that I wasn't really into. Yeah, neither of those games. I have heard of them and I have friends that play them, but I never got into either. They just, I don't know. It's kind of the styles, right? I think with MMOs, you have the really popular ones like, World of Warcraft, you have Lost Ark. They're popular for a reason. I never felt a need to play a game that maybe has average monthly users of, you know, 50,000 people a month, or 100, where Lost Ark's got, hundreds of thousands and WoW has hundreds of thousands. It's like,
Mhm.
well, if I want an MMO, I want to get that MMO aspect. I want to see a lot of people,
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. That's kind of the big thing with the whole server meshing, sharding, like, and why some of those ones we were talking about that are more story based, kind of just storyline. You're playing a single player game with MMO aspects. Never interested me. I think the only one I ever played besides RuneScape was Phantasy Star Online, and I was like, I feel like I'm just playing an RPG.
yeah. And I think Black Desert, like somebody commented, it was more of a, cash grab for certain male player bases as well. It was very
What?
inclined jiggle physics. Yeah, it's just very, oh yeah, the booba costumes and stuff. It's like, okay, clearly they're catering to a certain thing here.
That's something I feel like I've just noticed to be particularly common in the MMO genre. Um, Coming from like FPS games, it was like, why is everybody so scantily clothed?
Right? Yeah, but yeah, let's see.
I wanted to talk about guides, tutorials, sort of hand-holding, teaching. How do MMOs usually handle that when it's coming to later game stuff? So obviously, it's easy to teach someone right before they start playing the game, or right when they start playing the game, how to do the basics. But when it comes to something that's a little more advanced, I've always wondered to myself how they'll handle that when it comes to Star Citizen. You don't want to just start shoehorning tutorials into the middle of the game, but you also don't want to force people to have to go look up things on the wiki. Maybe you do. I don't know. Have you do games mostly just do hint systems with these MMOs? Have you seen any creative ways to teach the game?
I mean, so you have two different styles of late and end game for MMOs.
Mm-hmm.
For, the theme park MMOs, it's always a grind, right? You always have some grind of getting your best in slot gear, daily quests to get, reputation with these high end factions, but you're really just repeating stuff ad nauseum over and over and over until the next expansion comes out, which is where the burnout comes in with MMORPGs.
Right. And the burnout's pretty common, I've seen.
And the burnout is super common. I mean,
Yeah.
hell, we're seeing that right now with WoW. Everybody's burnt out from the game. With sandbox MMOs, the late game is, it's whatever the tools that you have to make your late game. Have you maxed out all your reputation? Have you crafted the highest tier ships? Have you done that area that everybody's trying to go to get stuff? It's always, have you done a fleet battle this large?
Yeah.
It's always kind of a create your own end game as well. End game is always moving. It depends on what the best is at that point in time. It's always a moving dot. It's never a linear endpoint like theme park, MMOs are.
Is it dang it, I lost my train of thought again. Jesus. Remind me again, what were we just talking about? I got distracted by chat. We were talking about tutorials, right?
Tutorials.
Yeah. So Star Citizen is doing a lot of, they're trying to do a guide system. Have you seen anything like where people can sign up and get paired up into the game, but not have to use like a website or something?
I mean, yeah, usually it's a general chat or local chat where it's like, hey, I need help. Somebody volunteers.
It's just chat. They just use chat.
It's just chat.
Okay.
Yeah. No game that I can think of has a formal guide system within the game where it's like, hey, sign up here if you're a new player. Hey, sign up here if you're an experienced player. You both get rewards. Never had anything like that in any games. It's always just grab a friend or throw out a chat in the game and see who can come help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that they're actually doing better with that, and I guess it's kind of mandatory for this game. But most of these games, it sounds like, just don't get this complex. Like just looking at, say, the mining game loop, or let's take something even more simple, the medical system. Like having to specify certain types of medical healing, not really something that you see.
I mean, with games like Escape from Tarkov, which I don't want to bring that game in because it's not an MMO or an RPG,
Yeah.
but Tarkov definitely has that. You have like a bunch of different type of medical types, a bunch of different types of wounds, and you have to make sure you have the exact item on you or that you can find that item when you get injured. So that in-depth medical system we have seen, just not in MMOs. No.
Okay. Yeah, that's sort of when people say things like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I've seen that, but not in a game like Star Citizen." I kind of am always like, "Are you talking about it compared to MMOs?" Because I've definitely seen that with other games. So it does feel like there is a definite difference in these features in an MMO, an online connected game with all these different things going on, as opposed to just like a single player game. The last, go ahead.
I was going to say something that has struck me as very interesting is how player housing is going to be in Star Citizen versus other MMOs.
That's a good one.
Where it's going to be persistent and it's entity streamed, where your house is always going to be there. Your house could get blown up or raided and all that. And a lot of housing that we see in other games, Ashes of Creation is a game that's not out yet, but they're going to have it similar to what Star Citizen has, where your house is actually there, and if your town gets raided, your house will get burned down and you'll lose stuff. But in most other games, player housing is instanced, meaning it's there, but it's not actually there in the open world. So
Right. Yeah. And I've heard a lot about what was it, Ashes of Creation. The idea of player housing, because it's, I assume, a very common thing, getting to customize a place like that. Is it actually useful, or do people generally just use it for housing? Can you make bases? Can you make operating areas, factories? I imagine a game like Eve might allow that, but getting into some of these other MMOs, is that something you see?
Yeah, I mean, Ashes of Creation is going to do that, where you can actually add defensive fortifications not only to your house, but to the cities that you take over, and even castles that are going to control multiple cities, which is going to be really cool just for that game specifically. But Ashes of Creation is going to be a new one doing things like that, which is going to be similar to what I assume Star Citizen will have. You can add AA turrets to your, housing
Right.
or whatever.
So making like a fully defensible base like that is pretty new.
It is pretty new. I mean, Ashes of Creation will be doing it. It's still going to be at least another 2 years probably for them. And Star Citizen, who knows?
Okay. How
Yeah.
about the idea of how big the cities are in Star Citizen? Because yeah, you can't go to the whole thing, but the idea of going from the apartment to the spaceport and stuff like that, is that something you see very much?
Um, that's hard. Um, I guess in ways, again, that's another way that Star Citizen is so unique. Um, but nothing that we haven't seen specifically yet, because I think every game has areas and places that you're not meant to go to.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Well, if you have a spaceship, you go anywhere you want, except for near the buildings, and they just blow you up. Very rude.
exactly. And I think it's the same way. I think there's certain mountains that you can't fly across, and WoW, there's areas they don't want you going to because it's not developed or it's only a backdrop for the set.
Okay. So, did you have any other things that you really wanted to touch on?
No, I just wanted to touch on housing, which we did, but
Okay.
I
Then,
think to sum things up, I think Star Citizen is going to be a new, interesting take on an MMORPG that we have seen certain aspects of through certain games, but combined as a total package, and the way that CIG is packaging it will be a truly unique way that we will get to see, that we may see other people from other MMO games get into Star Citizen because of.
yeah, that's. I think I kind of alluded to that earlier. How people come from all different types of games for this. Some people come for the space stuff. Some people come just for the crazy feature set that they're at least proposing. It's not there yet, and a lot of the stuff is still up in the air. But it's some pretty unique stuff that they've been trying to do.
Yep.
The last thing that I wanted to talk about today before we got going was the community of MMOs. Now, I've never been part of an online game community. This would be my first. It has been a wild ride. It's pretty crazy. I think Star Citizen's community is probably under a different sort of mindset than than most around finished games. But when it comes to MMOs in general, I imagine the community is pretty important. How does Star Citizens compare, though?
I mean, I think it's more accurate to compare Star Citizen's community to communities of games that haven't come out yet, because I think the critiques are always going to be leveled in different ways. The critiques for WoW are not going to be the same as the critiques for Star Citizen. The critiques for, maybe a game like Ashes of Creation or Fractured, games that are in alpha or beta states, they're going to be maybe more similar, but again, it's all specific to what the game is and what its end goal is. Um, and I think the community reactions and the base of the community, can change. With Star Citizen, it's a huge project that's been years in development that takes a lot of patience. I think, I hope I'm not saying this wrong, but a lot of the community of Star Citizen are people who are in some levels of patience, right? Um, Again, I hate saying that because I know there's a lot of people that are
I
patient.
mean,
Hell, I'm not even
it's
patient.
like the most you have to be the most patient, impatient person to
Right.
care about the game. I'm not a patient person, but I've had to learn it.
Yeah. But I would say I think there's a lot of similarities where it's just communities wanting to see a game become the best or at least become what they were sold on it being. I think you will always see that with any game. Players always want a game to succeed and be exactly what they want it to be. Maybe they're wrong, maybe the game developers are wrong, but I think that's one very broad, generic similarity. But I think with Star Citizen, it's got so many lofty goals that it is, again, truly unique in that regard, where player complaints, you don't see those in other games because they're complaining about things that we've never seen before. So,
Yeah. The community around Star Citizen is probably a little more optimistic than other crowds just because of the nature of the game. But I think it's got to be one of the nicest communities. At least I feel like it's been showing its teeth a little bit more recently. But overall, like this community is so freaking friendly, inviting, encouraging of people who kind of approach the game with an open mind. And I think part of that is just because, like, for so long, people have had to just kind of be helpful. The CIG drops the ball so much, and I'm not going to put all of the blame on them because they have a constantly changing game, but they drop the ball a ton when it comes to the new player experience. And that just forces the community to get super close, help each other, sympathize with each other, and I think that makes the community a lot more enjoyable to be around than some other games I've been in. But I don't know how MMOs communities are. Like, how was Eve's community besides the
I
Excel
think
sheets?
Eve, yeah, besides the Excel sheets, yeah. I mean, from the experience I've had in the Eve community, again, I mean, I probably played it for like a month or two. Eve's community is definitely similar to Star Citizen's in the terms of toxicity. I mean, just on this stream alone in the comments section, we've had people arguing just about Star Citizen as a whole. I mean, you just kind of attract those kind of people who are wanting to get into arguments or heated discussions when it's not appropriate, when it's not even asked for. Just to draw attention. I think you see that with, Eve Online as well. There are a lot of people who just like to start crap. We get that a lot with Star Citizen. It's not necessarily the same or at that level of impact is like other games. Like WoW community can be toxic at times, not to the level of Star Citizen or Eve. You take a guild like Guild Wars 2. I just saw the comment. Like there are certain MMOs where the community is so friendly and so supportive
Mhm.
that like they will go out of their way to give you the shirt off their back and the money in their wallet to
Yeah.
help you out because they want that game to survive so well.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a scale factor. Star Citizen is definitely on the more toxic scale factor for sure. If you're not getting made fun of for backing the game or being interested in the game, you're being made fun of for spending money on the game, to engaging in it, to believing in what CIG has, planned for the game. You are gonna get bullied just because you even talk about it.
Well,
It's
but
just
that's
the nature of things.
talking more about outside of the community, right? We're talking about inside the community, how people
Not not even just outside, inside too. I see it all the time. So,
Well, I do feel like
because the community itself in Star Citizen is divided. I mean, a lot of people that back the game are toxic as hell.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not so much the division that I'm noticing, more so than that just
Yeah.
it feels like people are airing their grievances, their frustrations in any conversation they can surrounding the game. And it's starting to lead to conversations never really going anywhere because everybody is disagreeing about different things that the other people in the conversation don't actually care about. And so it kind of goes in a circle. And I feel like we've been bouncing a lot between that and between people assuming that others want to basically take away the gameplay that they like. It just feels like it started to see a lot more conflict popping up recently. And I definitely still really love the community. It's still my favorite gaming community I've ever been in. Also the first, but but seriously, it's a great group of people. But I have started to see some of the more concerning discourse, I guess, coming up.
Right? Ah, gosh.
But anyways, Draaz3n, thank you so much for joining me for this show, talking about MMOs here. I know nothing about them. I'm sure many of these questions were super basic. I bet this conversation probably answered absolutely nothing for some people who are very into Star Citizen, but I hope that some people out there who got to listen to this or watch it got to get some new info and maybe understand where Star Citizen sits in this genre a little bit more than before. Obviously, rather, a lot of the games that we talked about today aren't necessarily direct comparisons to Star Citizen. Most of them aren't direct comparisons. It wasn't necessarily to draw actual lines to each game. It was more just to look at the different features and philosophies surrounding the game and how that compares to what Star Citizen wants to be. So, Draaz3n, thanks so much for joining me for this. I know you don't make content, but you are very active in the community and people see you a lot. You want to talk about maybe what you like to do, where you spend your time, your org?
Yeah. Go follow Space Tomato.
Smash the like button.
Yeah. If you're engaged in Space Tomatoes community at all, you'll know me. Again, most of the comments I've made are more broad spectrum, just talking about, MMOs that have almost no link to Star Citizen at all, just aspects that we may see in the game. So I know from comments, why are we talking about these games? Just we're seeing little aspects of what's being pulled into Star Citizen from games that aren't even related. But yeah, you want to catch me anywhere that Tomato is, I'm usually not too far behind. So anywhere there on the Garden Interstellar, our org that we have for Star Citizen. We recently did a little refresher of everything with a phenomenal website if you haven't checked it out yet. Again, all these links will either be here in the YouTube chat or anywhere you can find Space Tomatoes content. So
cool, dude. Thanks. Well, that's about it. Episode 69. And by the time this comes out, we actually might be looking at 318 going to Evocati. So future us in the comments section of this, in the show notes, I really hope that's where it went. But we'll just have to wait and see. Regardless, thank you all for coming and watching. Thanks for listening. If you did on the your favorite audio platform, we are on all of the good ones. Spectrum, or not Spectrum. Oh my gosh. Spotify, not Spectrum. Apple, Amazon, all them things. So hit us up, drop a like, maybe a review, and I will see you all next week in the next one.